The Friday Crime Report. October 2022, Excelsior Springs, Missouri. The Kansas City Defender, a nonprofit media startup, had posted a video on TikTok the prior month featuring Bishop Tony Caldwell, a local community leader who had numerous reports of at least 4 young black women murdered and 3 missing. He and others alleged that there was a serial killer on the loose targeting black women, and they knew where this was happening, on Prospect Avenue. Naturally, the Kansas City Police, one of the most racist police departments in America, which is overrun with white supremacists, said that the claims of a serial killer stalking black women were completely unfounded rumors. One has to wonder how involved the Kansas City Police are with these killings. Anyway, the rest of the white media did what they always do, acted as the mouthpiece for the thugs in blue, repeating the police line, saying there's no serial killer on the loose and certainly no one targeting black women because the cops said so. And at that very same time, while the white media and police were denying reality, a young black woman was picked up on Prospect Avenue by a white male. The man brought her to his home, took her down to his basement, and proceeded to beat and rape her repeatedly. He then had her locked in a small room in the basement, which he used as his torture dungeon. The victim was kept in those hellish conditions for weeks, chained by her wrists and ankles, being systematically raped, beaten, and starved for this satanic creep's amusement. On October 7th, around 7:30 a.m., the victim was finally able to escape when the rapist took his 8-year-old son to school. Reports say the child had been in the house while all this was happening. I want you to think about that. This animal was kidnapping, beating, and raping black women, and at the same time playing the part of the dutiful father making sure his son goes to school. And kids aren't stupid. They know a lot more than people think, and kids can piece things together, especially as they become adolescents. This is just one of the many ways the dominant society creates psychopaths, and to think people actually wonder where these school shooters are coming from. The young woman got out of that house of horrors barefoot with a padlocked metal collar around her neck, and she had duct tape around her throat as well. The young woman was emaciated from the torture she had endured, but she made it to a home 100 yards away. The lady of the house, Lisa Johnson, was there, and the young woman asked for help. According to Lisa Johnson, who's also a nurse, she looked like something out of a horror movie. Indeed, for a lot of these creeps, horror movies are actually power fantasies. They identify with the killers. Lisa Johnson described the young woman as being dehydrated and very malnourished. She was no more than 70 pounds, and that she had no tears because she was too dehydrated to produce any. Lisa Johnson said she would call the police, and then said the young woman became afraid upon hearing that. Well, of course she did. The Kansas police are just as violent as the animal that she'd escaped from. The young woman told Lisa that her captor had already killed 2 of her friends. The young woman then fled to another house, this one belonging to a woman named Ciara Tharp, whose grandmother was watching the house at the time. Grandmother Tharp heard the young lady yelling for help, and she answered the door. Again, the young woman told her she'd been raped and the killer was still out there. The elder Tharp gave the young woman some food and water and stayed with her until the police arrived. No word on whether the police knew the sadistic rapist personally. The cops finally arrested the animal when he came back from taking his son to school. They arrested him on an unrelated animal control violation, so what that means is he was already known to police. His name is Timothy Haslett Jr. When the Kansas City Thug Patrol searched his house, they found his torture dungeon along with numerous firearms. He was eventually charged with first-degree rape, first-degree kidnapping, and second-degree assault. He's being held on $500,000 bond, but he's since demanded a hearing to have the bond reduced. The Kansas City police are claiming that they're taking the accusation that he killed other women in that house very seriously. They said they searched the entire property and covered it completely, but had found no signs of other victims having been there. The Kansas City Thug Patrol said that they wanted to dispel any rumors of Haslett's alleged victims being missing women from Kansas City. Now, there's 2 problems with that statement. First of all, this is the same police department that said that any claims of black women being picked off from that street were just rumors to begin with. So now here they are saying, well, here's our job. Our job is to dispel any rumors. Yes, same way they were dispelling rumors that all this was going on. And the second problem, I noticed some weasel words saying that they wanted to dispel rumors that the victims were missing women from Kansas City. That leaves a lot of room for them to say, okay, maybe they weren't missing women from Kansas City, but they were from somewhere. So the police's own words make it suspect when they try to claim that there are numerous law enforcement agencies across the area who have confirmed that there are no current missing persons reports corresponding with evidence examined in the investigation so far. And that's just another pack of weasel words. The police didn't say that they didn't find any evidence that there were other women who were held there. What they said was the evidence that they had examined didn't correspond to current missing person reports. So that leaves a hell of a lot of room that there were a lot of evidence of other bodies that were there, but it just wasn't anyone who they had a missing persons report on. You will be hearing that phrase later on because the Kansas City Police Department used that same phrase as a justification for why they weren't looking into these missing women in the first place, claiming that none of these black women had been reported as missing, or so they say, and I think we all know what the Kansas City Police Department's word is worth. But that whole thing about missing persons, that clearly is their go-to excuse to try to hide behind to cover their butts. But even if we were silly enough to believe the same crooked police department who said that claims of black women being abducted were false, that still would beg the question, why were the police bringing out bags and bags of evidence if there wasn't any evidence? And the Clay County prosecutor has announced that the search warrant's going to be sealed for the next 30 days. He said they want to protect the information so when they talk to witnesses, they can tell authorities what they know. Strange talk if the police believe that there's no other victims. My question is, were the Kansas City police covering the scene or covering it up? If we look into this sicko's past, how long will it take before we find that he has ties to law enforcement? Because these were the exact same Kansas City police who said that claims of black women being kidnapped from Prospect Avenue were completely unfounded. They were rumors. They said it wasn't happening. And now that there's proof that it has been, we're supposed to believe that these guys are going to get to the bottom of it. Already, the Kansas City Thug Patrol are saying that the reason they haven't been doing anything about the missing black women is because, they say, nobody's been reporting them as missing. The police have since boarded up the windows on the psycho's house, and they put a chain link fence up. Again, that would be strange behavior for the police under any circumstances, and is even stranger when they claim they didn't find any evidence of other victims. Are the police really trying to protect this case, or are they trying to protect themselves? Now, of course, there's the obvious comparisons to Jeffrey Dahmer, and that's obvious enough given the police's behavior regarding these victims, but there's also something else that needs to be said about this case. Something the white media is not putting into any of their stories about this crime. It's no accident at all that Timothy Haslett chose to prey on black women, because he's also a rabid, mouth-frothing white supremacist. His social media is littered with calls for race war, and he made it a point to defend the murder of Breonna Taylor. I guess as he saw it, that was just practice. In one Facebook post, he said that he would only be willing to talk to black people when, quote, they're willing to stop blaming people like me who've never did a effing thing to oppress them for all that's wrong in their life. This animal, who has been kidnapping, raping, and beating black women, claims he, never did a effing thing to oppress black people. And then at the bottom of his racist screed, he wrote, I'll continue supporting racist, oppressive policing of the blacks because as long as they're choosing to act like my enemy, then oppressed is exactly where they need to be. Well, so much for claiming he never did anything to oppress black people. Now, there's been little white media coverage of this case at all. They certainly haven't made it a prominent story. But of the few outlets that did mention it, not one of those white media outlets pointed out that this guy is a white supremacist. In fact, they mentioned nothing about his social media racism at all. You've had white media outlets from ABC all the way down to the Huffington Post do stories on this atrocity, and not one of them mentioned that this guy is a white supremacist. Only the Kansas City Defender, and maybe, who knows, one other outlet perhaps mentions this. The white media's had plenty of time to gather more information on this crime, so it's not that they don't know. The headlines all should be reading that black woman escapes from white supremacist who kidnapped, beat, and raped her for a month. She also accuses him of killing 2 other women. The reason the white media doesn't mention the race angle isn't because they don't know, and it's not because they think it's irrelevant. is because the white media approves of what happened. So the Kansas City police aren't the only ones trying to limit how much the public learns about this case. Hazlitt's Facebook page is still up, though a lot of the posts have been removed. But when you go to that Facebook page, you see that in 2020 he updated his profile picture with an image of Friday the 13th killer Jason Voorhees. So as I said, these white supremacist degenerates, they look at slasher movies as power fantasies. White power fantasies. This is the white supremacist mindset. Pure projection. They take everything they do and then project it onto black people. This way, the white supremacist never has to take responsibility for anything they do. Of course, their crimes and their denial of reality is made a lot easier because you have police like the Kansas City PD who claim the white supremacist crimes aren't happening in the first place. They commit the most vile, evil crimes on the planet, then claim they never did anything to harm black people, all the while they're steadily picking out their next black victim. These crimes don't happen in a vacuum. This Timothy Hazlitt degenerate, he didn't just appear out of thin air. These crimes and these criminals keep happening because this society is racist to its core, and that racism is anti-black racism. You have police who blatantly refuse to investigate crimes that the community is telling them are happening. You have a white media who echoes what the police say and tries to defend them not doing their jobs. And then, when they're all predictably proven wrong, the police refuse to admit that they lied and the white media refuses to say that it was racial. This is what the Timothy Haslitts and other violent white supremacists know, that every institution in this country, from the police to the media to the courts, will get on code to protect them from scrutiny in any way. Black women go missing or turn up mysteriously dead all the time, and it doesn't matter who it is, where it happens, or how many black women it happens to, the white media never feels that it rises to the level of deserving the missing white woman of the week treatment. These white supremacist rapists and killers know that they can commit these crimes with impunity because they have the full support of police, the media, and the courts. Well, that's what you need the black media for. And by the way, again, I tip my hat to the Kansas City Defender for the work that they put in bringing this to light. This all just goes to show, if you're getting your news from the white media, you'll always be the least informed person in the room. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to